Good morning. Thank you.
It's not for the schools or seeing the big miracles in Eretz Yisrael in all areas. There should be a complete victory for Bnei Yisrael and total defeat of the enemies of Israel. And we should see the war stop immediately. And all the hostages come home safely, and all those that need refuah shlema should have a refuah shlema. The main thing is that we should see the real purpose of everything is to Mashiach coming, taking me ad mamash. Lam natseach mizmor David Yancha Adonai b'yom Torah Sagev Choshem Elohei Yaakov Yishlach Ezecha Mikodesh U'Mitzion Yisadeka Yizkar Kol Menchesecha V'Ailoscha Yidash Nesela Yiten L'cha Chil Vavecha V'Chol Atzoscha Yimale Nerana B'Yeshua Secha V'Shem Eloheinu Nidgel Yimale Adonai Kol Mishalei Secha Ati Yadaiti Ki Yeshia Adonai Mashiach Yanehu Mishmei Kodshe B'Gvureis Yesha Yeminei Eile V'Rechev Eile V'Asusim V'Nachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazkir Hema Korv V'Nafolu V'Nachnu Kamen V'Neseder Adonai Yeshia HaMelech Yaneinu V'Yem Koreinu. So before we go into the next ois, let's do a review. So yesterday I gave out these sheets. You can write on it. So those of you who did not get it, you have it right here. And we'll just go over briefly the questions on the first three oisius. So the first question: where do we find the first source that the Torah and Tefillah are called tents? In other words, when it says "Matoivu Alecha Yaakov," how beautiful are your tents? What? Well, Bilam is the one that we're discussing. So, is there a source before Bilam that tents could be Torah and Tefillah? And the answer is, we find it in reference to Yaakov. It says that Esau was a man who was out in the field hunting, and Yaakov was Ish Tom Yoshever, who sat in the tents. And over there, what does it mean? The tents of Torah and the tents of Tefillah. What are the three pirushim, the three ways of translating the word of the pasuk? Nasata l'recha neis lehisnesis. You gave those that fear you a neis lehisnesis. We don't have to necessarily remember what Rashi says, what the Mitzuda says, or what the other source says. What are the three interpretations? The word neis comes from what meaning to the word neis? So let's go over briefly again. One of them is that neis means test. That we're being tested. Another one that neis means we're being lifted and exalted. Right? And the third one is that the two things go together. We're being tested in order to be lifted and raised high like a banner. What is the main point of this ois? The main point is the question. The question is, why does he separate two things? One is Torah and Tefillah. And the second thing is the dwelling of Hashem Shechina. Isn't it all one and the same? Then we go to the second ois, page 20. What is the difference between Shem Havaya and Shem Elokim? Naturally, you'll find a lot of differences in a lot of Maimarim, but the question is, in this Maimar, in the context of this Maimar, what is the difference between Havaya and Elokim?
Elokim is like nature. It's a direction of Teva. Havaya is a past, present, and future.
So they're both names of Hashem, But Elokim is how Hashem does things in a natural way, and then he's concealed. And Shem Havaya is how Hashem manifests in a revealed way, where he's above nature. In other words, not Elokim is nature. Elokim is Hashem, but it's Hashem as he manifests through nature. Havaya is Hashem manifests through things which are above nature, because Havaya means past, present, future, all in one. What does it mean that an Asayim brings you to Shem Havaya?
Even if comes exposing the mention that you go into, that you become higher and become closer to Hashem.
That's one thing, but what does it mean specifically Shem Havaya?
Brings you to being above nature, but nature.
To recognize, in other words, normally we see the world through the eyes of Shem Elokim. We see a natural world. We understand that Hashem is in charge, he's behind it all, but what we see primarily is the order of nature. But when a person goes through Nisayon, he's raised higher, and what happens, he sees more openly Shem Havaya, which means he sees more openly that Hashem is above nature, and that's the truth of this existence, not the way it appears on the outside, as if nature is really in charge. Number 3, why are oisius, letters, why are they called avonim, stones? So the answer is because stones have no chayas in them. People live in a house. I mean, I put it this way: we said there's 4 categories of 4 kingdoms in this world, 4 categories of existence. So the first 3 all have some degree of life. Human life is the most complex and the most advanced. Then there's animal life, and then there's plant life. But avonim, stones, which is daimim, there is lifeless. There's no life at all. Oisius are the same thing. In the human experience, intellect is full of life, emotion is full of life, but the words have no life to them. Yes, people are able to speak words of wisdom and words of emotion, but the words themselves in their own right are dry and technical. They're only vehicles through which the emotion or the intellect is communicated. But the words themselves are like stones, they have no life. Why is it a nitzutz in a nisayon from a higher source than the nitzutz in food? Right, so here comes your answer, because the nitzutz in nisayon, because it's lower and it's aggressively opposing godliness, so it means it comes from a higher source. After reading all these things, what would we say is the main point in this ois? Ois base. I think the main point would be that Shem Elokim and Teva conceal godliness, and the truth seems to be hidden, and what seems to be false appears to be the truth. And through an Nisayon, we come to a place where we're able to perceive the emes and see that that which is blocking is not really true. That's what the whole idea of Shem Havaya and Shem Elokim. Then we go to Ois Gimel. We stopped by Dalet, so last Ois is Gimel. And he said that in a word, there's that which fills the word and that which is outside of the word. What are those 2 things in a word? What?
The word, like Kili and the word.
Right. So that's what fills the word. What does it mean, things that are outside of the word?
The combination of the letters. No?
Something else. We said that every word has two things. Something which is in the word. Let's say the word ba means to come. And then there's what it implies. Somebody came from somewhere. Where do they come from? Where are they going to? Why are they coming? Who is it that's coming? All this is not the meaning of the word ba, but it's implied by the word ba.
The vessel.
No, so the word ba is the vessel, it's the keli, and the meaning means to come, but there's another meaning which is misovav, sovev, which means it's about who's coming, where they're coming, why are they coming, and everything else about it. It's also connected to the word, but it's mechutz of the actual meaning of the word itself, but it's related. So why are Oisius called Kalim?
The combination that you do from the letters, it's like become a vessel, a kelly to all that
Right.
found in the world.
Just like Begashmis, a keli is a vessel that contains in it a light or an energy or something of greater content. So to Baruchnius, Oisius, the letters, they contain in it content, either intellect or emotion, or if it's a spiritual realm, contains in it spheros. That's the definition of kelim. How is the word teva, which means nature, related to the word teva that also means to sink? Something that's sinking in the water. What's the connection?
Oh, it doesn't, like, something that sticks in the water is just show that there's something in it. Like, you would have a blanket or something that's there, but it hides it. It brings it down like water.
And the same with teva.
And that teva also, like, you can just look at it and think that there's nothing behind it.
Right. So in other words, just like when something is in the water, it's covered completely. You don't even realize that there's something being covered. It could be a treasure in the water and you're totally unaware that it's there. Versus other things that cover, like we said, when you cover something with a blanket, you don't see what's there, but you can see something's being covered. So it means that nature covers up ungodliness in a way that it could be totally concealed, that it could be so concealed that you think this is the truth and totally unaware that there's something deeper going on. In what way is the darkness of our Golus worse than the darkness of previous Golusin? So this was the last line, what he said, that in terms of this concealment, that you don't sense any godliness, you don't feel any godliness, you just see totally, everything is completely covered by this facade, which is nature, and appears so clearly that it's all something that's independent of Hashem, and God forbid there is no Hashem. In our generation, this is more than it was ever in previous generations. So even though in previous generations, there were also all sorts of people. There were tzaddikim, there were simple people, people were not so dedicated, but still the sense of Hashem being there and Hashem's existence was something which was felt on some level. And in the later generations, especially now, it's concealed in a complete way. So the main thing is that our avodah is to reveal that which is hidden, to reveal Hashem's presence in this world. That's what an Nisayon is. Now, in this Ois Dalet, which we're going to start now, is going to do something new. Up until now, we spoke about the fact that there are sparks. The sparks come from the world of Tohu. Everything in this world is from those sparks. The higher it is, the lower it falls. So we know that the general difference between a Nisayon and other things that fell is that a Nisayan, the spark in Nisayan comes from a higher source. Now he's going to speak about another thing, and that is, how do we elevate the spark? How do we expose that spark? There is a difference between the approach to a Nisayan and the way to elevate and expose any spark of godliness that's hidden in anything else in the world versus a Nisayan. Nisayan is very different. Let's see the words inside now. Zehu kimenas savai. So Ois Dalet. In the booklet, this is where it says 196. Zehu kimenas savai elakechem eschem lodas. Ki kol inyan anisyonis. The whole purpose of a Nisayan, ulales, is for us to rise, ulagia, and to reach and achieve, aidei avoda davka, through hard work, through avoda, l'bchinas das es avaya, to know Hashem, which means to recognize l'mayla ma'ateva, to recognize that Hashem is truly above nature. Nature is just a curtain, is just a cover, and it covers up on the emes. And it suits the Shivagolos Achron, the sparks that are found in this last Golos, Befrad, because Mashiach, and especially at the end of the Golos, which is the time we're living in now, where we can hear the footsteps of Mashiach, Heim Nitzutzes Shel Nisyonis. I think I mentioned it briefly that the word Ikris Mashiach has two meanings. The word Ikev means, in Hebrew, means a heel. So one meaning is it's a generation where we can hear the footsteps of Mashiach. So just like Begashmias, someone is coming, you don't see the person, you don't see who it is, but you can hear the footsteps. In fact, sometimes when you hear the footsteps, you know who it is because you recognize it. But you don't see, you only hear footsteps. The other interpretation is that our generation compared to all previous generations is like the heels compared to all the other organs and parts of the body. In the earlier generations would be compared more to the brain or the heart or those faculties that have much more capacity, greatness to it. And our generation is like the lowest part of the body, which is not only the legs, but the heels. So in our generation, nitzutzes shel nisyonis, what we have to deal with more is the nitzutzes of nisyonis, of a test, that the godly spark is extremely hidden in them. This in itself is an indication about how great their source is, so much higher than the godly spark and everything else. Like the mushal of the stone that's on the top of the wall. When this wall falls, that stone that's on the top of the wall, that falls further away from the original place, from the source. The same is with the sparks of the world of Tohu. They fell much lower than the sparks that are found in everything else. So first of all, whatever you look at, we have to realize everything in the world that we're looking at, trees, the floor, the clouds, the sun, the moon, the stars, the whole planet, all the planets, everything you see is really godliness. And in everything that we see, there's a godly spark in it. And the godly spark comes from Elohim. When there's a Nisayan, we have to recognize that the godly spark in Nisayan comes from godliness itself. It comes from a much higher source, and that's why it fell so much lower. Yeah.
So is it saying that, like, when it's talking about the heels of the group of our generation, is it saying that the sparks are so much like lower or more hidden in our generation because they're from a higher? Is that what it's saying?
No, what he means to say is that our generation, which we are the lowest generation, we also have to deal with the lowest sort of sparks, which are the sparks found in the Nisyonis, more than in earlier generations.
So like the sparks that fall from in the beginning, like the other generations cleared out the ones that were on top of the
a little bit the one, those sparks that
the
were
sun and
right.
easy to find. So,
yeah.
And we're the ones that have to go to the ones that are more hidden.
We're diving into the deep sea. Here he begins. A Nisayan, the way to elevate a Nisayan, the spark in Nisayan, is not the way we elevate the godly spark in everything else. For example, food, or gashmis, or physical drink. There's a godly spark in the food. There's a godly spark in the water, or in the wine, or in the juice, whatever it is that I'm drinking. And when a person eats that food, and he does it according to the directive of the Torah, which is he makes a bracha before he eats. He makes a bracha after he eats. Turn the page. Three things. Number one, you make a bracha before you eat the food. Number two, you make a bracha after you finish eating the food. And the third thing is that the eating itself is in a more refined way, which means, like it says in Tanya, that eating the food is not just purely because of the physical pleasure, but I'm eating the food in a way that should give me strength to serve Hashem, to fulfill my purpose, and I eat the food in a more refined way. That's how I elevate the spark in the food. So there's a godly spark sitting in the food, and the godly spark is in a sense held captive because it's hidden, it's concealed. And that godly spark also wants to reconnect to Hashem. Whether it does reconnect to Hashem or not, if I can free this hostage, guess what? Depends on me. If I make a bracha on the food, I free it, which means when I'm making a bracha before and after and eating it according to Torah, of course, number one, it has to be kosher food. Then it has to be with the bracha before and after, and eat it in a refined way. Then what I'm doing is I'm reconnecting this spark with its source. That's what it means. I'm elevating it. I'm revealing it. I'm exposing it. I'm identifying this food with Hashem. So that means I'm identifying the true essence of the food, which is a godly spark that's in it. That's how I elevate it. Through this, there's a famous story. First of all, there's a story with the Alter Rebbe. That the Alter Rebbe, apparently this was before he became Rebbe, there was a butcher that had a shaila with the meat. I guess when you slaughter the animal, it has to be done according to the Torah, then it's kosher. If something went wrong, then it's not kosher. So he came to the Alter Rebbe and he said, this and this happened, and I don't know. Yeah, I need a halachic ruling. Is the meat kosher or not? The Alter Rebbe said, it's a complicated question. If you want to wait a little bit, I'll look it up. He sat down, and after a full day's work, he was very tired and exhausted, and he fell asleep. After sleeping a few hours on the chair, he wakes up, like, where am I? Remembers what he's doing here, and he takes a look. The Alter Rebbe is in his room, piles of svarim here, piles of svarim there, and apparently he's still researching this question. And he felt embarrassed that because of him, the Alter Rebbe is spending so much time. He began to excuse himself. I'm really sorry, I didn't realize there was so much time. Rebbe, it's okay, I'll just throw out whatever shaila there was with this meat, I'll just throw it out. Now, these are the words of the Alter Rebbe. I'll explain. The Alter Rebbe said, if you would see the way the ox is begging that it should be ruled that it's mutter, you wouldn't talk like that. What does it mean? It doesn't mean there was a cow there going moo, 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 make me mutter. It means there's a godly spark. There's a godly spark in the meat. The godly spark has an identity, just like Al Nisham has an identity. And that godly spark wants to be reconnected to its source. If you rule according to halacha, it's mutter, it becomes elevated. And we can eat it, make a bracha, and it gets elevated. If it's ruled that it's treif, it gets thrown into the garbage, it doesn't become elevated. So don't just say, let me just throw it out. The Friedrich once told a story that he went for a walk with his father in the country. And I was a little child. And the nature of children is as you walk, you pull little piece of grass or leaves off the tree, you hold it in your finger and you rub it. That's what I was doing. And my father said to me, that Rizal says that in every leaf on the tree there's neshamas or sparks. And you're just rubbing them and destroying them and throwing it out. In fact, that's why there's a halacha in Torah called halacha that you're not allowed to waste something that is useful. For example, here's a cup. We're drinking the cup. What if the cup is sitting on the table? Some interesting people have interesting nature. Like to take it and squash it and squeeze it and just throw it. Kids surely do that. Why? Whatever. Have to do something with my hands. But the truth is, this is, according to halacha, this is something which is not permissible because you're wasting something which is useful. So what's the big deal? According to Chassidus, the big deal is there's a godly spark in it. And the fact that there's a use for it means that by using it for what it's meant for, you're elevating it. And if you destroy it, then it's like you're just almost like destroying a life. Not a life of a human being, but it's the life of a godly spark. So there's a godly spark that wants to be reconnected to its source. And when I make the bracha before and after, that's me, in a sense, freeing it from its personal captivity. It's no longer hidden, now it becomes revealed and exposed and reconnects to its source. I know this means Shabiru Aides Askos Shalom Imam Michael Levarich Olav. You notice I underlined the word his askos. His askos means by engaging. The way to elevate the food is by engaging with it, eating it, making the bracha over it. The food that I'm eating is giving me strength, and that's how I elevate it. She'echel Hashem Shamayim eats it for the right reasons. By eating this food, I physically become strong, and that's my nutrition. Now the strength that I get from the food, which is in me, I'm now learning, and I'm now davening. I'm doing acts of kindness. The key my mitzvahs, observing mitzvahs. That's how the spark becomes elevated, becomes included into godliness. So in other words, I ate this food, this became my energy. Where does this energy go? The energy goes into my body, but where does it go from my body? I'm using the energy to daven, to learn to do mitzvahs. So that means that the energy that's in the food now becomes part of the mitzvah, the Torah that I studied. And when the Torah mitzvah that I studied goes up to Shemayim, that energy goes up to Shemayim together with it. The same as with all other gashmistic things, which means whether it's a spark in clothing, whether it's a spark that's in a building, in a room, in a table, in a chair, in an item that I use, a pen, a pencil, money, anything gashmis that I'm using in a proper way. How am I elevating it? By engaging with it, by working with it, I elevate it. And the reason for this, why is it in this manner? There is a spark that's found in this physical thing. That's why the way to elevate it is by dealing with the gashmizik thing. By dealing with it and dealing with it the right way, I'm allowing the spark to go up. The nichlan becomes included in godliness. How's the nisayon different? Hashem can be nisayon, but a nisayon, the way to elevate the spark that's in a nisayon is loibis askus boy batzma. It's not by dealing directly with the nisayon. It's not by engaging with the nisayon. What am I working with? Kimbis askus odemim atzmai. I have to work with myself. The work that I do, and what am I concentrating on, and what am I focusing on? I'm focusing on myself, and to give myself the strength not to pay attention to this nisayon. In other words, a nisayon is something that in essence, in its own right, it really has no true substance. The godly spark in food, in clothing, in objects has substance. And I have to elevate it. The godly spark in nisayon, which is basically denying Hashem in one way or another, has no true substance. You can't compare them to other physical objects. They are something which has substance, and they have a godly spark in it. And because there's substance there, I have to deal with it. That's why I have to engage this gashmistic object and do it in a way that the Torah says. But in the soyin, this is not something which has true substance. So what is it? Hashem allows something to what what is it? What's its identity? What defines in the soyin? It's something that has the ability lahalim v'limnoya, something that has the ability to conceal and to block me from zeu koich mitzuyusei. That is what makes it and gives it substance. The fact that it can deceive me. So therefore, my job is not to elevate that. There's nothing to elevate. My job is to work on myself, not to be able to fall into the deception that's being presented by this thing outside of me. Kol hes askus, all the work that I need to do, the person has to work with himself, to strengthen himself, to push away this concealment, which means to recognize that this has no true substance, and what appears to be something which is blocking is really not blocking, it only appears that way. And if I look at it the right way, I won't see anything that's standing in my way to serve Hashem. I mean, to use an example, when people came from the old country to the United States of America, I'm sure you've heard this expression. When they want to say somebody's a frum Jew, you know what they say? Oh, he's Shomer Shabbos. Why do they say Shomer Shabbos? There's so many mitzvahs. The reason was because in America, that was the defining factor, whether he's keeping Yiddishkeit or not. The most difficult thing to do was to keep Shabbos. And the reason was you couldn't get a job if you keep Shabbos. This is something I heard from someone. His name was Mr. Lasker, an older person. He's actually the father-in-law of the famous Rabbi J.J. Hecht. And I heard him tell the story. He came in the early 1900s, and he was a young boy. And I think he said he came with his mother. Maybe his father passed away, and he had to fend for the family. He went to get a job. Come Shabbos, he didn't go into work. By the way, who's the owner of the factory? A Jew, but not a religious Jew. Comes Monday, where were you? Shabbos, I don't work on Shabbos. So this was the words. If you don't work on Shabbos, you don't work on Monday. Goodbye. Okay, goes to finds a new job. Doesn't come in on Shabbos. Where were you? I'm Shomer Shabbos. Shomer Shabbos. If you don't come in on Shabbos, if you don't work on Shabbos, you don't work on Monday. Then he realized he can't do that anymore. So he worked in a new place. Where were you? I had a stomachache. Okay. Next week, where were you? I had a headache. The next week, where were you? I had a backache. After a few weeks, the guy said, come on, every Shabbos you have another ache? You keep Shabbos? Yeah. You keep Shabbos, you don't have a job. This went on for months on end, no end. He could not find a job, couldn't keep a job. At the end, he said he found a Jew who had Rachmanis on him. And he said to him, if you come in on Sunday to catch up on the working on the machine in the factory that you're supposed to do the work, I'll let you work here. I'll come in, I'll open the place for you, and you'll work on that machine. And he said this guy used to come in on Sundays, put his head out of the other people who worked there, which were all Yidden, would make fun of him. And they would call him the Chadaydi. Oh, the Chadaydi, you're going home. Because Friday night, you say the Chadaydi. The Chadaydi, you're going home. That's the way he lived. So if a person says, listen, I am religious, I always was religious, my father was, my grandfather was, but now in America, there's no way you could survive if you're going to keep Shabbos. This is not true. It's not true. And we see that people kept Shabbos, survived. So what is it? It's my perception. So there's nothing here that really has true substance. What I have to work on is not on the factory and not on the person. I have to work on myself, that I should not be deceived by this perception, which seems to be absolute certain that if you keep Shabbos, you can't live. I mean, we know even worse than that, that people on the boat, on the way to America, they threw away their tefillin, they threw away their tzitzis, and they said, these were the saying in those days, America is different. It's not the old country. And when you, with the Romans, you do as the Romans do, we can't live this way in America. They're running away, from Europe, and they felt there's the only way they can make this perception, l'chatchila, was sheker. It's false. It's only I perceive it that way. So the work that I need to do is not with the thing outside of me, it's with me to change my perception. It's just like a person, let's say, who feels insecure, and therefore they're afraid to commit themselves to do a job because they don't feel secure. You don't have to change something with the job. That's not going to help you. You have to change something in your perception to realize that you're capable and you could, and you have nothing to be afraid of, and don't feel the way you feel. The work is in my mind, not in the object outside of me. Generally speaking, that's why I gave the whole introduction. An asayin means when you see the sheker, appears to be emes, and the emes is totally concealed. So I have to work on seeing beyond the covering, beyond the curtain, beyond what appears to be false, and to see what the emes is. And when I see it that way, it is that way. You know how in art, sometimes they make certain pictures that you don't realize what the picture is. And when you take a look at it, someone shows you, oh, it's really something else. And you start, and once you see it, oh, now I see it. Before, you didn't see it. It's drawn in such a way that you see one thing. But if you look at it again, the shadow, this, that, suddenly you see another picture. So basically, this is what it is. It's my perception has to be changed. So this is the general difference between an asayin and the spark and everything else. Everything else, there's a real substance there, and my work is with the object, with the food, with the clothing, with everything that I'm dealing with to elevate the spark, by dealing with it. But when something is there that has no substance, then the avodah is with me, not to give it substance. And the more I dismiss it and don't give it substance, the weaker it becomes. If I give it no substance, it doesn't get in my way. And if I give it substance, I'm making it bigger. And the more I give it substance in my brain, the bigger it is out there. And how do I do that? When it's a simple test, maybe it's simple, but there are a lot of tests that are very difficult. So generally speaking, hu ayidei shema'ir koich atzmi. In order to do this, to really be able to see through the falseness of the world and to see that what appears to be so strong and so powerful and so real is really only deception, hu teikiv haneshama. We have to arouse koich atzmi, something very deep in my neshama, which is nekudas hayadus. That's in Yiddish we call it the pinta yid, the essence of the neshama. That is something that has very strong, and it's totally, it's so strong that nothing can break it, nothing in the world can bend it, nothing in the world can affect it. When that becomes revealed, I can stand strong, full strength against anything that is blocking. So basically, what he's saying here is two things, and I'll elaborate on this more. One thing is that an asayin is different than everything else. You don't have to elevate the object. You don't have to deal with the object. You just have to change your perception. And the second thing is that I have to, in order to accomplish that, I have to sort of bring out something deeper within me, something within me that's unbeatable, unbreakable, and that's the etzem of the neshama. There are a lot of stories of hidden tzaddikim, right? Ever heard any of the stories of hidden tzaddikim? These hidden tzaddikim, it doesn't mean hidden, they were hiding in a cave. They were walking around. They looked like some homeless person. And in reality, they were great tzaddikim. And they had vast knowledge of Torah. Some of them were able to perform incredible miracles. But outside, they looked like some schlepper. And some of them even looked like they were ignoramuses. They knew nothing. Even the Baal Shem Tov, initially, that's the way he presented himself on the outside. No one realized. So in order to see and to have a different attitude to the person, it's not that the person has to change or you have to change the person. You have to just change your perception and realize, wow, this person is a great tzaddik. Okay, next time I'll give a little bit of, I'll give an example, and there to be continued, but we've run out of time for today, so to be continued. You're very welcome. Okay, now don't go and bumping into walls. The wall is a real wall.
Thank you, Rabbi Majeski.
Put on a shirt, yeah.
It's really hard to read one of his books, that Blue Jones is 770, and then he said, what was that?
But like, yeah, it's really different, because they were doing, she would like practice reading more.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. You know, like it?
Hello. It's like it's
Michael Epa.
finish and writer. It's like really, I don't know. There's something about those people starting to finish my writing. I feel like it was.
Anybody there? Hannah, hi Razel. You're on. Hello?
Yeah.
Hi Razel. If it ends after 45 minutes, will you start it again for Rabbi Hanoka? It's a shame.
I go to the next class, so I'll try to remember.